Have you ever found something so small that it completely changed the way you see your life? A photograph, a sentence, a song you thought you understood, until one day it hits differently. This is one of those stories. Not about fame, not about heroes, but about love that survives silence. A man discovers a truth too late, and in that delay, he loses and gains something at the same time. You'll hear about sacrifice disguised as music, guilt that doesn't belong to anyone, and grief that refuses to stay quiet. This isn't just a story inspired by a song. It's what happens after the music fades and reality stays. So if you ever wonder where you come from or what unseen love made your life possible, stay with me. And if this story touches you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. He wasn't looking for answers that day, just cleaning old drawers, killing time, mine on autopilot. That's when he found it. A forgotten photograph, edges worn, silence screaming from the paper. A young dancer stared back at him, lace and ribbons clinging to a body full of life and dreams. She couldn't have been more than 20, beauty untouched by regret, frozen in another era. There was mystery in her eyes, the kind that makes your chest tighten for no clear reason. He didn't know why, but his hands trembled, as if fate had tapped his shoulder. Somewhere deep inside, something whispered, "This isn't just a picture, this is a beginning." He turned it over slowly, like someone afraid of what words can do when they land too hard. On the back, a simple line, written with love and careful hope, broke the silence. "Dear son of my heart, to you with all my love." No explanations, no dates, just affection carved into ink and time. His breath shortened, thoughts racing, memories searching for a place to anchor that sentence. Moments like this don't shout. They lean in and speak softly, so you have to listen. And he listened, even though part of him already feared the answer. He called his parents, trying to sound casual, as if curiosity hadn't already become urgency. They looked at the photo, and the room changed temperature in seconds. His mother's eyes filled first, tears heavy, ancient, carrying weight from years ago. His father followed, shoulders shaking, grief escaping through sobs he couldn't stop. That kind of cry isn't learned. It's stored, waiting for permission to exist. In that moment, he understood this wasn't about the past. It was about truth, and truth, once invited, never knocks politely. His father pulled him close, arms tight, as if afraid he might disappear mid-sentence. Silence stretched, thick and painful, before the words finally came. "Son, don't be afraid," he said, voice breaking between love and guilt. "We are your parents in every way that matters, and we've lived to love you." Sometimes love arrives not by blood, but by choice, sacrifice, and sleepless nights. That realization hit him like both comfort and shock, warm and cold at once. Because love explained some things, but not all of them. The truth unfolded slowly, like a story too fragile to rush. His biological mother lived in nightlights and loud music, dancing to survive. She sang, she moved, she smiled for strangers just to keep him fed. Every step on stage was an act of love disguised as performance. Until one night, alcohol stole her voice and silence took her place. With no way to care for him, she chose the hardest kind of love, letting go. And that choice echoed through generations, unseen but never unfelt. "She lives alone now," his father whispered, eyes fixed somewhere far away, in a quiet place, among the forgotten, where time moves slower. We often postpone difficult truths, thinking we're protecting those we love. But time doesn't erase impact. It only sharpens it. He felt anger, sorrow, gratitude, and confusion collide inside his chest. Life had rewritten his origin story without asking his permission. And somewhere out there, a door waited, one he didn't yet know he would open. That night, sleep never came, only images and questions looping endlessly. He knew, without saying out loud, that tomorrow would not be ordinary. Some truths demand movement, not reflection. Some stories refuse to stay buried once they surface. And as dawn crept in quietly, a decision was already forming. The photograph had done its job. It had pointed the way forward. What waited at the end of that path, though, was something no one could prepare him for. He woke up before the sun, as if sleep itself had pushed him out of bed. Some nights don't end. They spill into morning heavy and unresolved. The photograph was still on the table, like I hadn't trusted him to forget. He stared at it again, realizing how strange it is to miss someone you've never met. That's when curiosity turns into responsibility, and silence becomes unbearable. He didn't announce his plan. Some journeys don't need witnesses. All he knew was that staying would hurt more than leaving. On the way there, the world felt louder, sharper, almost intrusive. People laughed, cars passed, life went on, and that felt unfair somehow. He kept thinking about how many truths hide in plain sight, waiting decades. If you ever found an old letter or heard a story too late, you know that ache. It's not just sadness. It's regret borrowing time from the present. He wondered how many nights she'd spent thinking of him, and how many times he'd unknowingly walked past pieces of himself. The building was modest, quiet, wrapped in a kind of respectful sadness. Places like that don't shout pain. They whisper it through walls and eyes. He paused at the entrance, heart racing, hands cold despite the warmth. Fear doesn't always come from danger. Sometimes it comes from truth, because once you see someone, you can't unsee them. Once you know, you carry it forever. And he wasn't sure yet if he was strong enough for that weight. Inside, time felt different, slower, almost suspended. Faces passed him, each one carrying stories no one asked about anymore. Some smiled politely. Others stared through him like glass. A nurse asked his name, then asked hers, and hesitated. That hesitation was louder than words. In that pause, he felt hope crack just slightly. And when hope cracks, fear rushes in to fill the space. He sat down, waiting, counting breaths instead of minutes. Every second stretched like it wanted to test his resolve. He imagined what he'd say, how he'd explain his existence. Funny how we rehearse conversations life never lets us have. He pictured her voice, though he'd never heard it. He pictured forgiveness, though no one had apologized yet. And somehow, he still believed love would be enough. Then footsteps echoed down the hall, slow and deliberate. The nurse returned, eyes softer now, heavier too. Some news doesn't need many words. The body understands first. His chest tightened before his mind caught up. In moments like that, the world narrows to a single point. You realize how fragile timing really is, and how cruel it can be when it arrives just a moment too late. He stood up anyway, as if motion could undo reality. There are meetings that happen beyond presence. There are goodbyes that exist only in intention. He didn't know yet what he'd find beyond that hallway, only that whatever waited there would change him forever. Some journeys don't end with answers, they begin with loss. And the next step would take him somewhere even deeper than he expected. He didn't cry at first, and that scared him more than tears ever could. The nurse spoke softly, but the words landed hard, sharp, unforgiving. She passed early this morning, she said, eyes lowered in respect. Time froze in that hallway, like the world had decided to hold its breath. He had arrived with questions, maybe hope, maybe forgiveness. Instead, he was handed absence, final, irreversible silence. Some losses hurt because they happened. Others hurt because they almost didn't. He walked outside without remembering how he got there. The sky had darkened suddenly, clouds gathering like they knew. Rain began to fall, slow at first, then heavier, soaking through his clothes. People ran for cover, but he stood still, letting it wash over him. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just numbs. If you've ever missed someone by minutes, you know that hollow feeling. It's not pain. It's disbelief refusing to leave. Later, they told him where she was buried, a quiet place at the edge of town. The cemetery was almost empty, just wind, rain, and rows of names. He walked between them slowly, reading lives reduced to stone. When he found her grave, his knees gave way without warning. There she was, his beginning and his mystery, now marked by dates. He realized how strange it is to grieve someone you never knew, yet the connection felt undeniable, deep, painfully real. He spoke to her anyway, voice low, words clumsy and unfinished. He told her about his life, his parents, the love he'd been given. He apologized for being late, even though it wasn't his fault. We do that sometimes, take responsibility for fate's cruelty. The rain mixed with tears, blurring everything into one sensation. In that moment, he wasn't a man, he was still a child. A child asking questions the universe refuses to answer. As he knelt there, memories that weren't his began to surface. He imagined her on stage, dancing through exhaustion and hope. He imagined her singing until her voice faded into silence. Every sacrifice suddenly felt personal, intimate, inherited. Love, he realized, doesn't vanish when voices do. It changes form, it hides, it waits. And somehow it had waited for him. He placed the photograph on the grave, letting it rest there briefly. Paper soaked quickly, ink running, faces blurring. It felt symbolic. Truth doesn't always survive exposure, but meaning does, even when details fade. He promised her something, though he wasn't sure what yet, only that he wouldn't let her story disappear. Some legacies aren't passed down, they're discovered. As he stood to leave, the rain began to ease. Not stop, just soften, like the world showing restraint. Grief doesn't end. It transforms into something quieter. He walked away changed, carrying questions heavier than before. Because knowing where you come from alters where you're going. And now, a new chapter was forcing itself open. One that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. Grief didn't hit him all at once. It followed him home like a shadow that refused to leave. The house felt louder in its silence, every room echoing with thoughts he couldn't escape. He sat on the edge of his bed, still damp from the rain, staring at nothing for hours. There's a special kind of pain in losing someone twice, once in life, once in timing. He kept replaying the almosts, the if-onlys, the minutes that betrayed him. Sleep tried to come, but memories he never lived kept knocking. And somehow, they hurt as if they were real. He began grieving not just her death, but the life they never shared. No first conversation, no awkward smiles, no voice to recognize. He mourned birthdays that never happened, advice never given, mistakes never forgiven. People assume grief requires memories, but that's not true. Sometimes grief is about potential, love that had nowhere to land. It's like carrying a letter written to you that you're never allowed to open. Heavy, sealed, permanent. Days passed, but time refused to do its job. Food tasted like cardboard. Laughter sounded offensive. Routines felt pointless. He caught himself searching crowd for her face, knowing it made no sense. Pain isn't logical. It's loyal to emotion, not reason. Even music hurt, especially music, because it reaches places words can't. He wondered if she ever danced thinking of him, even once. That question alone was enough to bring him to his knees again. At night, the grief grew bolder, less polite. It crept into his chest, tightening, stealing air in slow waves. Tears came without warning, sometimes over nothing at all. A smell, a melody, a stranger's laugh, triggers everywhere. If you've ever lost someone without goodbye, you know this chaos. The mind looks for closure. The heart knows it won't come. And that battle is exhausting. He started visiting the grave more often than he'd admit. Not to speak. Words had failed him. But to sit and exist. There was comfort in being close to where her story ended. It felt like the only place where his grief made sense. Some people pray, some scream, some go silent. He just stayed, letting the weight settle instead of fighting it. Resistance, he learned, only deepens a wound. One afternoon, anger joined the sorrow, sharp and sudden. Anger at fate, at timing, at a world that gives answers too late. He questioned everything, choices, beliefs, even love itself, because love, when delayed, can feel cruel instead of kind. Yet beneath the anger lives something fragile and dangerous. Connection, a bond formed not through presence, but through sacrifice. And that realization unsettled him deeply. As weeks blurred together, he sensed a shift inside. The pain wasn't fading. It was changing shape. Grief was carving space, forcing reflection he never asked for. He began to feel that her story wasn't finished with her death, that maybe it had been handed to him, unfinished and heavy. Some losses don't close doors. They open responsibilities. And soon, he would understand just how much that truth would cost him. At some point, the pain stopped asking for comfort and started demanding meaning. He noticed it on an ordinary morning. the kind that shouldn't change anything. The grief was still there, heavy, familiar, but now it carried a question. What am I supposed to do with all of this? Loss has a way of cornering you until you respond. Ignoring it no longer worked. Distraction felt like betrayal. So he finally let himself listen. He began revisiting everything his parents had told him, slowly, carefully. Details he'd ignored before now felt urgent, almost alive. Her nights, her songs, her dancing under lights that never loved her back. He imagined the exhaustion behind the smiles, the courage behind the makeup. Suddenly, her sacrifices weren't just sad, they were powerful. She hadn't vanished. She had endured. And endurance, he realized, leaves traces. He started asking questions he'd never thought to ask. About music, about the places she danced, about the songs of that time. Music became a bridge instead of a wound. Some melodies still hurt, but others felt like whispers. If you ever played a song and felt someone's presence beside you, you get it. It's not memory, it's resonance. And that resonance was pulling him forward. There was guilt mixed into it too, quiet but persistent. Guilt for the life he lived while she struggled alone. Guilt for not knowing, even though he couldn't have. Grief loves guilt. They feed each other when unattended. But instead of sinking, he questioned it. Was honoring her story a way to release both? That idea refused to let go. He found himself writing things down late at night. Thoughts, fragments, images that wouldn't leave his head. It wasn't poetry, not exactly, more like confession. Putting words on paper didn't heal him, but it organized the chaos. Pain, when shaped, becomes easier to carry. He wasn't trying to create anything yet. He was trying to survive honestly. People around him noticed a change before he did. Quieter, more reflective, less rushed by meaningless urgency. Grief had stripped away his impatience for shallow things. Some conversations felt empty now, others sacred. Loss recalibrates what matters, whether you agree or not. And deep down, he sensed this wasn't the end of the shift. Something was coming. Something that would force him to act. One evening, as a familiar song played softly in the background, it clicked, not like a miracle, but like a truth settling into place. Her voice was gone, but stories survive voices, and stories, when told, refuse to die. He understood then that remembering wasn't enough. Some legacies asked to be continued, not just honored, and that realization opened the door to a decision he wasn't ready for yet. The guilt didn't arrive loudly. It seeped in, quiet and relentless, like a slow leak in chest. It showed up in the smallest moments. When he laughed too easily, when life felt almost normal, every smile felt borrowed, every comfort undeserved. He caught himself thinking, why do I get to be okay when she never did? That question followed him everywhere, refusing to be answered. Guilt has a cruel talent for rewriting logic. It convinces you that surviving is a kind of betrayal. He began dissecting his own past, searching for crimes that didn't exist. Childhood memories became evidence in a trial only he was attending. Birthday candles, school photos, quiet dinners, all suddenly felt incriminating. Each happy moment echoed with an invisible cost paid by someone else. This is how guilt grows roots, by turning innocence into accusation. If you ever felt ashamed of joy, you understand this territory. It's lonely and it's exhausting. At night, his mind replayed imagined scenarios on endless repeat. What if he had known earlier? What if he'd found her in time? He knew these thoughts were unfair, irrational even. But guilt doesn't care about fairness. It thrives on possibility. It feeds on every alternate timeline you can invent. And the more he tried to shut them down, the louder they became. Silence only amplified the noise. He visited the cemetery again, standing instead of kneeling this time. There was anger in him now, sharp and self-directed. I should have been there, he whispered, though logic disagreed. Sometimes guilt isn't about responsibility. It's about connection. Blaming himself was the only way he could stay close to her. Letting go felt like abandonment all over again. So he carried the weight, believing it was the price of love. His parents noticed a change, the heaviness he couldn't hide anymore. They tried to reassure him, reminding him of truth and timelines. But reassurance bounced off guilt like rain on stone. Because guilt doesn't want solutions. It wants punishment. He withdrew, not out of anger, but out of shame. Shame convinces you that your pain is inconvenient to others, so you learn to suffer quietly. Music, once a bridge, became a battlefield. Songs triggered images of stages, lights, and a woman dancing through exhaustion. He imagined her losing her voice night after night, still smiling. That image alone could unravel him completely. How could he enjoy art born from someone else's sacrifice? Yet he couldn't stop listening. It was the closest thing to her. Love and torment tangled until they were inseparable. One evening, the guilt peaked into something almost unbearable. He realized he wasn't just grieving her, he was punishing himself, as if pain could somehow balance the scales of fate. But deep down, another truth was forming, uncomfortable and persistent. What if the guilt wasn't meant to crush him, but to move him? What if it was pressure, not a sentence? That thought lingered, heavy and dangerous, hinting that the next step would demand everything he had left. The realization didn't come gently. It came like exhaustion after a long fight. He couldn't keep punishing himself and still call it love. Pain without direction had started to rot inside him, and somewhere between another sleepless night and a silent morning, he understood something crucial. Grief either imprisons you or it assigns you a task. There's no middle ground for pain this deep, and his had been asking for purpose all along. He sat alone with the photograph again, now creased and faded from too many hands. For the first time, he didn't feel crushed by it. Instead, he felt watched, not judged, but trusted, as if her sacrifices were asking him a simple question: what will you do now? Not to repay them, that was impossible, but to carry them forward, so they wouldn't dissolve into silence. Legacy, he realized, isn't inherited. It's accepted. He started imagining her not as a ghost, but as a woman in motion, dancing under dim lights, voice breaking, heart refusing to quit. Not weak, not tragic, but relentless. That shift changed everything, because honoring her didn't mean drowning in sorrow. It meant refusing to let her life be reduced to a sad ending. Stories deserve more dignity than that. He began to see his guilt differently, almost gratefully. It wasn't there to destroy him. It was there to wake him up, a reminder that comfort can coexist with responsibility, that being loved comes with the duty to love back, loudly. If you ever felt called to protect something fragile, you know this feeling. It's terrifying and grounding at the same time, like standing at the edge of a decision you can't undo. The idea of speaking her story out loud scared him more than silence ever did, because once spoken, it would become real to others, vulnerable to misunderstanding, judgment, indifference. But silence had already done enough damage. Keeping her story hidden felt like a second disappearance, and he had lost her once already. He wouldn't lose her again to fear. He tested the idea slowly, sharing fragments, not the whole truth. A memory here, a detail there, watching how people reacted. Some listened deeply, others brushed it off. That taught him something important. Meaning isn't universal. You don't tell stories for everyone. You tell them for the ones who are ready to feel. And that was enough. Standing at that crossroads, he felt the weight shift again. Not lighter, just clearer. The path ahead wouldn't bring closure, but it offered continuity. And sometimes that's more honest. He didn't know yet how far this promise would take him. Only that once made, it couldn't be taken back. And the next step would force him to turn memory into action. The truth finally settled in a way that no tears could soften. She was gone, and time had chosen its side long before he arrived. Death doesn't ask if you're ready, doesn't wait for courage or clarity. It takes. And then it leaves you standing in the wreckage of almosts. He wasn't just mourning her life. He was mourning the delay. Knowing she had existed all along made the absence unbearable, because losing a stranger hurts. But losing a mother you never met breaks something permanent. He grieved the moments that would never be born. No first embrace, no awkward conversation, no shared silence on a tired afternoon. He imagined her waiting day after day, not knowing if he'd ever come. Waiting is its own kind of suffering, quiet and invisible. The thought that she might have hoped until the end crushed him. Hope, when unanswered, becomes a wound that never closes. And now, that wound lived inside him, Standing by her grave again, he felt the weight of stolen time pressed down. He spoke aloud, even though there was no one left to hear him. "I'm sorry I'm late," he whispered, voice shaking, useless against the truth. Those words echoed with no reply, no comfort, no forgiveness. Some apologies aren't meant to be heard, only carried. And this one would follow him for the rest of his life. Because love, when delayed, turns into regret that never rests. The sky seemed heavier that day, as if mourning alongside him. Rain returned softly, almost respectfully, tracing his face like shared grief. He stayed longer than necessary, afraid that leaving meant losing her again. There's a strange fear in walking away from the only place grief feels justified. He wanted time to stop, to bend, to offer one impossible exception. But time remained cruelly indifferent, unmoved by pain or prayer. And that indifference hurt more than the loss itself. He thought about how many nights she must have danced exhausted, how many times she swallowed fear just to keep going. All of that strength, all of that sacrifice, unseen, unrecognized. The world never applauded her hardest performances. And now, even he had arrived too late to say thank you, that realization hollowed him out in a way nothing else could, because gratitude, when unsaid, becomes another kind of grief. As he finally turned to leave, something inside him cracked open. Not healed, just exposed, raw, permanently changed. He understood then that time doesn't heal everything. Some wounds are meant to remind us of what mattered. Her absence would always ache, quietly but faithfully. Yet even in that ache, her love still lived, undeniable. And carrying it forward became the only way to survive what time had taken. The truth finally settled in a way that no tears could soften. She was gone, and time had chosen its side long before he arrived. Death doesn't ask if you're ready, doesn't wait for courage or clarity. It takes. And then it leaves you standing in the wreckage of almosts. He wasn't just mourning her life. He was mourning the delay. Knowing she had existed all along made the absence unbearable, because losing a stranger hurts. But losing a mother you never met breaks something permanent. He grieved the moments that would never be born. No first embrace, no awkward conversation, no shared silence on a tired afternoon. He imagined her waiting day after day, not knowing if he'd ever come. Waiting is its own kind of suffering, quiet and invisible. The thought that she might have hoped until the end crushed him. Hope, when unanswered, becomes a wound that never closes. And now, that wound lived inside him. Standing by her grave again, he felt the weight of stolen time pressed down. He spoke aloud, even though there was no one left to hear him. "I'm sorry I'm late," he whispered, voice shaking, useless against the truth. Those words echoed with no reply, no comfort, no forgiveness. Some apologies aren't meant to be heard, only carried. And this one would follow him for the rest of his life. Because love, when delayed, turns into regret that never rests. The sky seemed heavier that day, as if mourning alongside him. Rain returned softly, almost respectfully, tracing his face like shared grief. He stayed longer than necessary, afraid that leaving meant losing her again. There's a strange fear in walking away from the only place grief feels justified. He wanted time to stop, to bend, to offer one impossible exception. But time remained cruelly indifferent, unmoved by pain or prayer. And that indifference hurt more than the loss itself. He thought about how many nights she must have danced exhausted, how many times she swallowed fear just to keep going. All of that strength, all of that sacrifice, unseen, unrecognized. The world never applauded her hardest performances. And now, even he had arrived too late to say thank you. That realization hollowed him out in a way nothing else could, because gratitude, when unsaid, becomes another kind of grief. As he finally turned to leave, something inside him cracked open. Not healed, just exposed, raw, permanently changed. He understood then that time doesn't heal everything. Some wounds are meant to remind us of what mattered. Her absence would always ache, quietly but faithfully. Yet even in that ache, her love still lived, undeniable. And carrying it forward became the only way to survive what time had taken.